Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is someone whom I met through the, the social network, you could say, of Mike Michalowicz, my first guest. He came back for episode 69. He's somebody that most of you know and love like I do. And so I'm thrilled to have Jeffrey Shaw with me today. He is the author of The Self-Employed Life, and he also has a podcast of the same name. And as you might guess, he's a coach for self-employed business owners. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from him, not only for self-employed business owners, but I'm always looking for the parallels between being a self-employed business owner, being an entrepreneur, and taking that entrepreneurial spirit inside, because I know a lot of our listeners are high-level executives at large organizations. I think that there is a lot of crossover between those two things. So you can find Jeffrey at jeffreyshaw.com. And if you go there, you can get an assessment from Jeffrey about your strengths and weaknesses in this area of being a self-employed business owner. I'll let Jeffrey tell us about that a little more later. He's also, you can also find him at the site selfemployedbusinessinstitute.com and linkedin.com/in/Jeffrey Shaw author. And all that stuff will be in the show notes. So Jeffrey, welcome.
Hey, John, glad to be here with you.
Well, thank you. Glad you're here with me. We've kind of been circling each other through our various connections, like AJ and Lee Hayes and Mike Michalowicz. So nice to actually get a chance to sit down with you and go through, some of the things that you talk about. So first of all, let me just start. I want to hear about about the self-employed life. I want to hear what you talk about in the book, but I want to ask you first off, who was a leader in the, maybe in the early days of your career who made a real lasting difference for you? And what was the lesson they taught you? Tell us the story, would you?
Yeah. So I would say, honestly, who had a huge influence on me was Wayne Dwyer, the author. And reason being is that, I always say I was a personal development, geek from a really early age. And I didn't grow up in the reason it had such impact on me is I didn't grow up in a culture that my family did not worry about growing as people, right? It was about survival, just they weren't interested in growing as people. But as a 14-year-old or so, I would save up what little allowance I had, and I would buy Wayne Dwyer books, and I'd hide them in my house because, God forbid somebody found them, because that would just be weird in my family. But that had a huge impact on me because it put me on the road of really this idea that personal development matters, that growing and looking inward. I grew up in a family that, they weren't interested in looking at what made them tick. I was really interested in not only knowing what made me tick, but how it could grow. So that was a very early influencer for me on the whole path of personal development, which of course then makes you curious as to how does personal development relate to success mindsets, which is why, to this day, personal development is a huge component of my work. It's especially when you're self-employed. There's a inevitable connection between who you are as a person and your experience as a business owner when you're self-employed. It's undetachable. And then more specifically, a huge influence on me was my first business coach, which I hired in 1999. His name was Ron Port. Back in 1999, having a business coach was as uncool as doing yoga, and I did that too, But again, you didn't tell people you did yoga. You didn't tell people you had a business coach because it was kind of unheard of in 1999. And those are peak years of my business. But like a lot of us, I found it just so, I'll say, lonely, and not like I wasn't surrounded with a lot of people, but it was lonely making all the decisions on my own, and it was lonely trying to figure out. I had a staff of 5 people, but it just felt lonely. And that's why I hired my first business coach, almost more for that, John. But honestly, it also just escalated my business exponentially in ways that I wasn't prepared for, because I didn't know what a business coach could do other than have as like a business therapist. I didn't expect the actual tangible results you can get from a business coach. So those would be the two things that had the most influence on me.
So what's one of the takeaways from Wayne Dwyer? I mean, I get personal growth and development's important, but did any of his sayings or writings, like anything you could quote that really stuck out for you?
Not really, because what I credit Wayne Dwyer for in reading the books was just I said, lighting the flame that personal development mattered. The person whose quotes have the most impact on me is Jim Rohn. Specifically, a quote that I repeat often in my book is that your level of success will rarely exceed your level of personal development.
Yeah.
And there's the tie-in, right? And I firmly believe that, particularly when you're self-employed. Like, I look at personal development as a capacity. And what I see, one of the greatest problems for self-employed business owners, entrepreneurs, employees, like one of the greatest problems is that you're putting in a lot of effort, working really hard, but until you've increased the capacity of what you believe you deserve, what you're capable of, what you imagine is possible for, until you do that work to increase the capacity, all that hard work is like overstuffing a sack. It's like, and if this proverbially, like, you feel like you're bumping your head against the ceiling, you're running on the hamster wheel, all those phrases.
Yeah.
It's all because you're putting in all the effort. So you're like slamming everything against the wall, but you haven't done the interior work to actually acknowledge, what's holding me back is I don't really believe I deserve this next level of success or next level of income. And until you firmly get that you deserve it, and this is one of the biggest blocks I see with people, particularly people like myself that come from very humble beginnings.
Yeah.
If you start busting out of your humble beginnings and you start surpassing your family, one of your biggest hangups is, do you believe you deserve it?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like you're setting a glass ceiling on yourself.
Yeah.
So Jim Rohn is, as far as quotes and really tangible takeaways, I mean, just a wealth of wisdom.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting from I fully agree with you. And one of the things that made the biggest difference for me and taking new levels of success and even just fulfillment and the right people in my life was when I spent a year in a personal growth and development course. And one of the big things that we worked on was letting go of the conversation about deserving and not deserving. Just letting that whole concept of deserving or needing to deserve it or do I deserve it, just letting that whole thing completely go. And for me, I'm not a religious person, but I love some of the concepts. It's like the concept of grace, right? Okay, you're a sinner. You don't deserve it, but like God's going to give it to you anyway. So I just kept letting go of that and telling the universe that whatever it gave me, I wouldn't bother about whether I deserved it or not, but I'd take really great care of it.
But here's the thing, John. I don't know that you can really let it go until you believe you deserve it in a way. Or it's sort of like any social issue, right? When a social issue, when it is necessarily talked about a lot, and society doesn't like it when we talk about social issues, when we bring rights of certain individuals to the forefront and it gets talked about a lot, I studied Buddhism for a lot of years, and honestly, the path of Buddhism is silence. We don't have to talk about things when they're a non-issue.
Yeah.
So we don't have to talk about whether you deserve it or not when it's a non-issue. So the question is, how do you get it to be a non-issue? You have to kind of go through the door of what's holding you back because you're not feeling like you deserve it, so that you can get to the other side and say, I deserve it. And when you do, it's a non-issue. And that's when the silence, as you said, in your head stops. So to me, my whole course in life is silence, and I'm far from a silent person, right? So I always say that's the indication to me that I have a long ways to grow, because I still need to talk a lot and process things. I process things verbally.
Yeah.
I process an incredible number of things on a podcast interview. It's like your brain is processing. But to me, the path is silence, and I hope to be a very quiet old man, and my kids will really appreciate that.
That's great. Well, so how about like a down moment? Like what was the What was the low point or one of them in your life and your career? And like,
yeah.
What did you learn from that? Because those are usually the big learning moments, right?
Yeah. So, I'll say one on a business side first, and I was young. I was like 23 years old, so it seems unimportant because you're so young. But to me, it was everything because I had one skill set in the world, and that was photography. That was literally it. I felt like it was my only ticket out of the environment in which I grew up in. Was this one skill set that showed up in my life that I innately was good at and was getting awards at without trying. So I decided to make a career of it and went off to photography school. So the down moment for me was when I, without knowing otherwise, returned to my hometown to be this hotshot photographer. It just fell flat on my face. Like nobody wanted what I had to offer.
Right.
And the low moment was, and I described the low moment as having a conversation with somebody I thought was a prospective client, and it was yet another rejection, and a very clear rejection because I was really making my best pitch, as a portrait photographer and telling her why she should have photography. And she said, that sounds great and all, but I don't have the luxury of worrying about my children's memories. Like, I don't know how I'm paying my rent this month.
Right.
And I walked in the back room of my studio. I literally leaned against, I think I fell against the wall. I slid down and I just cried.
Yeah.
It's like, I was exhausted. 3 years of trying so hard and literally feeling you're just beating the wrong drum or yelling at the wrong tree.
Yeah.
And it was obvious to me in that moment that I either had to make a major change or all my dreams are shattered and I was going to be stuck in this town that I wanted nothing more than to get out of. And the socioeconomic situation I grew up in, it was a dead end moment. But the lesson was I realized I was barking up the wrong tree. I was like, well, then what's the right tree, right? Who out there would appreciate what I have to offer? Because I felt like I was facing a moment that a lot of business owners face. Do I change everything that I am and what I believe in to fit the market I was in? Or do I fundamentally believe, as I do to this day, that there's a world of people waiting for me to show up? I just need to figure out who they are, and I need to market myself accordingly, and I need to lead with the proper communication to get through to them, and they'll come. Yeah. And I decided that the people that were waiting for me to show up happened to be very affluent people. And not because I knew nothing about money or affluence, but based on the negative feedback I was getting, it let me believe that people needed discretionary income to choose my product, my service, because it was something, nobody needs family photographs.
Yeah.
So it had to be people that could afford luxury. So I had to find people with discretionary income. So it turned my whole life around. That's the theme of my first book, Lingo, like learning the lingo, that secret language of the people I wanted to serve. Changed my life around. In 1 year, my business went up 5 times. Not that was a huge number because it wasn't much to begin with, but it was a trajectory. I ended up having like a once in a lifetime career as a photographer, and that has been everything from the work that I do with my clients today. Like I help them identify their ideal clients and get to know their lingo and call them in through right communication.
Yeah.
So that was I said at 23 years old. It didn't. I had an apartment. I was actually already married. I had responsibilities, but the bigger problem was this is all I had. This was my only ticket. I had no other skill set. I didn't know what else I would do.
I mean, I know that there's a certain power in desperation, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I got very focused. And here's the thing. And this is to this day is the way I tick is that I give myself 3 months to fix everything in business and in life. I don't know. For some reason, I think you can completely change your life in 3 months. And so I gave myself 3 months to figure it out. And I also think financially, and I told this people when the pandemic hit, I was telling my clients and fellow business owners, like, you can figure out how to get by for 3 months. This thing is likely to go on for more than 3 months. My guess was 7 months. I didn't think it was going to go on as long as it did.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is going to be around for more than 3 months. I said, so, if you're anything less than 3 months prepared, you need to buckle down. Because I think you can survive almost anything for 3 months. And in worst case scenario, most of your creditors will wait 3 months to get paid before they really start going nuts. Mm-hmm. So I gave myself 3 months to figure it out. I gave myself 3 months to, as I explained in my book, Lingo, I studied the behavior of affluent people by going to high-end brands sitting back like a fly on the wall and observing. I didn't care about the brand. I cared about the customers. I watched, what were they looking at? What was compelling them? What was ticking them? I looked around, high-end brands, restaurants and stores, saying, what works? Like, what emotionally triggers this clientele?
Yeah.
And just broke it down. And I studied the heck out of that for 3 months out of desperation, and then completely rebranded, reinvented, relocated, launched myself in the world as if that's the way I had always been. And it caught on immediately. Like, it was just instant. And I gave myself a 3-month deadline. Is do or die. Either figure this out, or for the first time in my life, get a job. And to this day, at 58 years old, I've never had to take a paycheck from anybody. I've never had a traditional job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. And a good lesson, right? Like, listen to your customers or your not customers, and figure out how to talk to the people that want and can afford your services.
Yeah. Study the people you want to serve or attract. I speak a lot in HR, which was never my intention. I mean, the fact I started getting hired as a speaker in HR events and to go into companies and help them with the recruiting was a result of people seeing my brand messaging strategies and realizing, hey, everything you're talking about attracting ideal customers is also true about recruiting ideal employees. It's like, whoever it is you want to attract into your life, I don't care if it's a love life, employees, or customers, the onus is on you to understand them without judgment, without assumption. And believe me, I grew up, the way I grew up, I heard every stereotype there was about rich people, none of which played out to be true for me in the 38 years I've been serving them.
Yeah.
None of them were true. But you can't listen to judgments. I'm amazed at whether it's companies wanting to recruit today's workforce, whether it is companies that are now trying to figure out how to adapt to this new mindset, what appears to be a new mindset of employees post-pandemic. What do you need? What do you need to learn to get? Say if it's a win-win, right? What do you need to learn about today's workforce? What's occurring to me, and I'm hearing a lot more of, and I may do something with it, because I was asked on a podcast what I thought the future of work looked like. And I said specifically, I think the best employees of the future will have a self-employed mindset. And I think companies would serve themselves extremely well to embrace that. And if they don't understand what a self-employed mindset is and what makes a self-employed mindset person tick, talk to me. Because I'll tell you, because that, I think, is the future of work. That's the future of employees, because there are plenty of people that don't want to own their own business, but they want the autonomy. They actually want to be as passionate about your business as if they owned it, as you are.
Yeah.
And you can leverage that. You want to leverage that by giving them autonomy and choice and objectives and goals instead of hours and boundaries. And you'll get so much more out of people.
Yeah.
So to me, the whole world is just becoming more self-employed in one way or another. Even as an employee, like, you can't let go of marketing yourself, because your next job, you need a personal brand, just like a self-employed business does.
It's interesting, Jeffrey, because I've been on the internet specifically since 1987, and I've been watching technology just eat the world, digital eat the world since then. And one of the things that I've thought a lot about is how much technology is atomizing things and giving the power to the individual. It used to be that you needed a whole publishing company and a big building and all this equipment. And then all of a sudden we have desktop publishing, and every single individual could potentially be a publishing company and have everything they need just themselves. Right. And I think the danger of that is, how powerful we're making any individual in the realm of like biotechnology or weapons or whatever. There's some scary aspects to this atomization and empowering of the individual, but I hadn't ever really thought about it in terms of how you're saying it. But I do think it's a natural outgrowth of what technology has been doing naturally anyway. Now it's just giving that power of an entire company to each individual, and everybody could be self-employed, even if they are technically an employee. And I
Right.
couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Which means new leadership skills. It needs, because you can't let everything splinter off into chaos, right? So
Yep.
it requires new leadership skills and new levels of communication, but really leveraging what is going in the direction. I use the phrase "you can't stop a moving train" a lot in business, because for the life of me, I can't figure out why people waste the energy trying to stop the inevitable.
Yeah.
Right. And, I used to use as an example about, the whole, Napster being sued by Sony and, all the battles against streaming music. Well, how well did that go? You know, I mean, and those artists that learn to adapt and to adjust and, hey, let the world download their music for free, but I'm such an amazing live performer. People will come to the show. I mean, it's a constant source of adapting, but it's what a waste of energy to just try to stop a moving train, which is what I think is going on now. It's like, why is any company really trying to stop what is inevitable? That employees want autonomy. They want a self-employed mindset. You might fight, you might even win a couple battles as a company over the next couple of years, but you're not going to win in the long haul. I've been around too long. I'm 58 years old, been in business for 38 years. I have never seen a moving somebody actually stopping something that was happening anyway.
Yeah.
We haven't stopped the internet. We haven't stopped the fears. And now we're dealing with deep fake, right? I mean, scary as heck. These ideas of deep fake videos, and the fact that a world leader, a video of a world leader could be created, put on the internet that says a meteorite is about to hit the planet and the world goes into panic. Like, there's real issues, but you know what? You're not going to stop it. So you better figure out how to deal with it.
Totally agree. Well, so in the self-employed life, tell us a little bit about the overarching message of that, and maybe some of the stories in there, because I think that's applicable here.
Yeah, 100%, because it's actually one of my, I'm actually working on a keynote, and as I'm trying to sketch this out, I mean, one of the areas I want to speak at is, because the theme of this keynote is the difference between the conventional business world and unconventional business world. And my point is that we unconventional business owners, whether it's the business we're in is unconventional, just by the pure nature of being self-employed is unconventional in a conventional world. And I've realized now I've spent 38 years translating the conventional world into an unconventional world that actually works. So instead of having everybody else reinvent the wheel, I just want to teach people, and that's what we do in the Self-Employed Business Institute, is like, let me just teach you what you need to know, because everything you've heard about traditional and conventional business is BS. Like, it's such nonsense, and it needs to be translated into a way that works for you. So, one of my core goals of this keynote is to point out how, just by nature of being self-employed, how much we have put up with trying to fit ourselves into the conventional world for other people's benefits. And I'm making a statement. It's like, no, it's time for us to start demanding people fit into our world. The fact of the matter is, when you're self-employed, you're not going to shut off work when you're at home, and you're not going to shut off home when you're at work. And I don't know that employees get away with being able to do that too much anymore either, right? Because the reality is your personal life has an impact on it. The difference, though, is performance. When you're self-employed and the demand for performance is so high on you, you run a greater risk of not performing as well when there's something in your personal life dragging the energy out of you, because we are called to such peak performance. So instead of us adapting to them, I'm like, I want to encourage people to get the world to adapt to you. And I'm just, throughout my life, I recognize that I have secretly hidden or tried to avoid people noticing that I'm distracted because something about work is on my mind. Or, you're having dinner with friends, with family, you're out. And of course, when you relax, that's when you're going to get your best business ideas. We already know that, right? But we don't allow ourselves, we don't want to be impolite, so we don't pick up a napkin or a cell phone and make a note. And I'm tired of apologizing for that. Now I just want to say to people, I'm such an awesome business owner. I just had a great idea. Excuse me a minute. I'm going to write this note on my cell phone. You deal with it, other dinner party guests, right? I'm sorry that seems rude to you, but this is my life, right? And I'm not going to not grab that idea that just came to me because I'm trying to be polite over a glass of wine at dinner. It's like, it's probably the wine that gave me the great idea. So, I just think there are just a lot of ways in which we have accommodated the world around us at our own peril. And I just, I just fully embrace who I am. I'm proud to be self-employed. I'm proud of the idea generation process that I inhabit. And I'm just not going to apologize if it doesn't happen at a convenient time for other people. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Good. I agree.
As you can tell, I feel nothing strongly about that, though.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah. Well, so what do you think that somebody running a company who's got a team they're managing that's like gone mostly virtual for the past couple of years, and like, what could they learn from that experience of yours?
Yeah. Well, I just think in general, the self-employed life, to those of us that have lived it, either a long time or in my case, our whole life, it is one mixed bag. And I think you just have to, somebody was telling me recently how they were disciplined for spending 10 minutes on the phone with someone that their boss overheard. And it seemed like it was just a nice conversation, but it wasn't heading towards the goals that the team had set. I mean, and disciplined for this. Yeah, and stuff like that just shakes my head. I'm like, if it's relationship building, it served a purpose. Yeah. If it was a conversation where this employee had to listen at that person's troubles, that person is going to remember that conversation and want to do business with this company. So I think overall, it is there's just so many bad, just old, outdated mindset. I mean, right now we have a lot of conversation going on about quiet quitting, right?
Yeah.
And I have had some pretty heated discussions with people who are shaming people who are doing this quiet quitting thing, right? Yeah. I mean, shaming. Like, that's what's wrong with the world today. Everybody's lazy. These employees today are entitled. How dare they not go the extra mile? That's what's wrong with people. Like when I was young, I would always go the extra mile. And, I always come back to saying, but what about the responsibility to make sure your employees are engaged, inspired, and motivated and feel seen, right? And I don't think the shaming part to me is I just cannot believe that anybody, company or individual, would want to shame people for wanting to live a full life. Right now, what everybody is craving, John, is to live a life of substance, of happiness, of fulfillment. There is no shame in saying I want that more than I'm being compensated or motivated at my job. Therefore, I'm quiet quitting because I'm not getting what I need, right? And I don't want that to turn into passive aggressiveness, but I do think the bigger picture here is that we're living in a world where people really want their dream lives. And as anything else, I've been coaching for a long, long time. We only let go of something if what we're going to gain is better. So if they're quiet quitting, it's only because they believe the prospect of leaving and building something else is better. How about making the staying better if that's the case?
Yeah.
So I just, I think what employees can learn is there's nothing to be gained in the long run in shaming people for wanting to live more self-employed like lives. And I would encourage, clear communication amongst the leadership to their employees. I would encourage really, really getting to know what makes your best employees tick, what makes them happy, what makes their lives fulfilled, and how you can achieve it. Is it all remote work? Is it partial remote work? Is it like, how do you help people achieve the lives they want? And then they'll stay. I think that to me is, as a speaker at HR events, one of the points I would make, because I was such an outsider as someone who's never had a traditional job, I always found speaking at HR events kind of funny. But I would always say that one thing that strikes me as an outsider is, why do companies try to fix internal problems after the fact? Like, why do companies try to fix employee engagement problems and culture problems, when to me the best route is, why don't we make sure you get the right butts and seats in the first place? Like, just like in marketing, the whole goal of marketing is to only attract your ideal customers. Why not work so incredibly hard in recruiting so you only get people that are excited about the culture and are a fit and are engaged? Then there isn't a problem to fix from the inside.
Yeah. Well, you're making me think of a few things. One is that saying that I think is very true, that people almost never quit jobs, they quit managers, So like that's one of the really important places to focus when you're hiring is, that good management and people who are good with people. And then the other thing that I think that I'm hearing is, I think culture beats strategy every day, like 24/7, because actually culture arises or strategy arises from culture, and I think that one of the things that I think a lot about is just the fulfillment factor of the job. And how can you as an employer make that the jobs of the people that you've got working for you more fulfilling and more 100%. Meaningful, yeah. Right?
And it's the only thing that keeps a self-employed business owner going, right? I mean, this is not the easy road. At the end of the day, it's because they feel fulfilled by what they do.
Yeah.
Why not bring that into corporate?
And you can do it, right? It doesn't have to be that the job is inherently fulfilling. Like even if the job is not necessarily what you would look at and go, yeah, that's got to be fulfilling. We love to be on teams. We love to be acknowledged. We love to do something that feels meaningful to us, even if the meaning is derived from the fact that, maybe the day-to-day thing you could argue about whether it's super meaningful, but we get a paycheck and we get to take care of our families. And we've got things that maybe we do as a team. One thing that we do outside of work that also is fulfilling and meaningful. And if we, that's what we're doing this for is. So I just think that meaning and fulfillment and connection and all those very human things, they're just I think it's just kind of turning from negotiable to non-negotiable, whether that's part of the job now, like it's just non-negotiable anymore.
I think there's hardly a feeling in the world better than the feeling of a job well done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an inherently human feeling. I don't care if you are, sweeping floors, lining up shoes. There is just such an incredible personal fulfillment in the feeling of a job well done. And I actually think what appears to be the most jaded of employees, I think actually what they want is the feeling of a job well done. And I think they're open to that. And I think employers would serve themselves well to encourage that feeling of a job well done, because it is what keeps you going. It's what keeps us self-employed going, because it's not the easy road. The greatest satisfaction for us is the feeling of a job well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's inherent. So, Jeffrey, tell us about that assessment form at your website, jeffreyshaw.com.
Yeah. So it's you can also go directly to it at selfemployedassessment.com. Selfemployedassessment.com. What it is, and it's really the cornerstone of my book, The Self-Employed Life. That again, being self-employed. Likewise, if you want to encourage the self-employed mindset in the workplace, you have to recognize there's an ecosystem. And I like to look at business as an ecosystem so that we are looking at ourselves holistically, because we can't compartmentalize whether you're an employee or a business owner. In today's world, you're not going to be able to compartmentalize your personal life from your business life, nor are you going to be able to compartmentalize your personal development from your level of success, which is what I'm saying. You always have to develop the person first. So I have always looked at business very holistically and accepted it for what it is, that being the reality. So I built out this assessment to test the three big buckets of the self-employed ecosystem, which are personal development, business strategies, and daily habits. All right, so we need to develop ourselves, as we've said. We need to have the right business strategy, not just the tried and true, because the tried and true are basically tired. So what are the right business strategies that work for your business? And then all of that needs to be supported by really strong daily habits and mindsets. Because the risk is not in what you build, the risk is in not supporting what you build. We can build anything, but if you don't have a foundation under it. So to me, daily habits and mindsets are a huge part of that.
Yeah.
So that's the three-part ecosystem, if you will. So the self-employed ecosystem, it's 6 quick questions. I I invested a ridiculous amount of money in a custom algorithm that takes the 6 questions and provides a full report as based on the cross intersection of your questions, what you're strongest in and the areas of the ecosystem that need work. Then you can begin, because to me, an ecosystem is just that, just like it is in nature. It's unfortunately, to reach your maximum potential, it's not a place where you can be at 50% in any one of those 3 areas. What you're being called to is to be 100% healthy in all 3 of the areas. Because just like an ecosystem in nature, if one thing is off, it can kill the whole thing. Right? Global warming. The sea waters are warmer. Here in Miami, we have a problem with the sea waters being warmer. So the vegetation at the bottom of the ocean floor is dying off. Manatee only live on vegetation. They're vegetarian mammals. So we literally have crews in Miami that are hand feeding manatees lettuce by hand because there isn't enough greenery, right? So think of the tree. If that wasn't done, we still are having a tremendous number of manatees dying because they can't all be reached.
That's heartbreaking.
So one thing is off, right? The water temperature is off, and it's throwing off the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And what happens in a business is, I don't know that, I'm not going to say that it's going to kill your business, but I can guarantee that whatever is off in your business is causing you to work harder than you need to. And those moments when you kind of are flying, everything's rocking and rolling and things are in flow, it's likely because you have a healthy ecosystem. You happen to have an intersection of everything working well. But let's face it, that's a pretty rare exception until you get a hold of the self-employed ecosystem and work it out and making sure it's a thriving and healthy ecosystem across the board.
Yeah, awesome. So, and that's something that people can get for free.
Yeah. Yep, and the report's pretty extensive. It's pretty cool.
Right.
I mean, it gives you, like I said, I had a brilliant guy create this algorithm. So the report is thorough and customized. It's not like just general data. It's customized based on how you answered.
Fabulous. Well, so Jeffrey, anything, like, I know we're coming up on our time here. Is there anything I didn't ask that I maybe should have asked, or anything that you'd like to just say?
I don't know, pant size. I mean, I'm not sure. Where you buy your underwear? Actually, you don't want to know. Oh gosh, John, I don't know. I just enjoy the conversation we've had. I'm glad. I have to say, I'm really glad that you brought in the conversation about employees. I don't think that is, again, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I see maybe the potential for some consulting work, some speaking in companies. When I wrote my book, and you and I share the same speaking rep, and when I wrote The Self-Employed Life, I told our speaking rep, don't bother pursuing corporate gigs because who's going to hire me to teach their employees how to become self-employed? But in rethinking that, I was totally wrong in saying that to her, because a couple of things. One is that employers will benefit from hiring self-employed mindset employees. And they also would serve themselves well by supporting the many side gigs that employees have nowadays. And I think it's going to be inevitable of Gen Xers. Like, they're all going to have side gigs. My 25-year-old daughter reached out to me and said, and she has a very good job. She's like, "Hey, Dad, what do you think I might be able to do on the side? Because I'm looking forward to having kids. And when I do, I want to contribute to the household finances, but I want to be home with my kids," right? Yeah. Already thinking side gig. Yeah. And this is going to be, so I think that's a really interesting aspect too, that employees can encourage that without feeling like it's an interruption to their ability to be productive in the workplace. I actually think the more you this is, I guess, the core message for employers, is the more you can let your employees show up as their full and whole selves, the more you will get from them, the happier they'll be, the more they'll stay. Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, I think that's very good. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me, Jeffrey, and I wish you all the best. And I think that, your message is certainly good for self-employed folks, but I do think, one of my big, having been an entrepreneur like you for the vast majority of my life, employees are a big deal. And the more of a self-employed mindset my employees have had, the more they've contributed. The fundamental bottom line to me of a self-employed mindset is ownership, like I'm on the hook because there's, nobody else is going to do this if I don't do this.
Yeah.
And
my daughter is one of my daughter's on my team.
Uh-huh.
Her partner's job shifted such that she had Fridays off. Uh-huh. So first thing I said to my daughter without her asking, I was like, okay, well, let's alter your work schedule so you also have Fridays off. Right? That's my way of thinking. It's like, oh, how wonderful that your partner now works 10 hours a day, 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That's what works for her company. Like, well, now let's adapt your work schedule so that you and your partner have 3 days off a 3-day weekend. Like, and she said, oh my gosh, that didn't even occur to me. So that's the way I think as an employer. And I'd like to encourage more people to think about that. Like, how can you actually meet people's lives, make their lives better, and still benefit?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fabulous point. And I think that's a great thing to leave in everybody's mind. So Jeffrey, we'll put this out. All those URLs will be in the show notes. And I really appreciate you taking the time and your offer of that assessment. That sounds great. I think people will enjoy that. And I'll look forward to seeing you. I'm sure that we'll bump into each other again, given the circles we run in. And I thank you for your time and for your wisdom.
Thank you, John. I appreciate having me on.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy Speak Like a Leader show, we sure would appreciate you telling others about it. And if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this, that would make a big difference too. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us here on Speak Like a Leader show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.